Let's get rusty. Let's get rusty, boys.
Developers hate Rust, despite Stack Overflow claiming Rust is the most loved.
Did Google just F up? What is this? What is this view you just did, Google? It's like half there, half not there. What is that? All right. There we go.
Language year after year. I haven't seen this much genuine hate for a programming language in a long time. It's gone so bad that merely mentioning Rust
That's a W. That's a W. Can we get a W here? Let's go. Let's go. That's a W right there.
can trigger developers. But this hate isn't all unfounded, and it usually stems from 5 reasons.
Ooh.
The first one being lack of job opportunities, to which I just
Well, let's hear what he has to say.
have to say. The second reason
There's one thing that remember, of the jobs that are available, it's still like 75% crypto bros. Solona's gonna make it, man. Like, dude, it's just like, that's, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And the second thing is that if you watch the Stack Overflow survey from last year to this year, there were more people satisfied in using Rust percentage-wise at their job, but there were less people overall using Rust at their job. And they used percentages. They didn't even like, it wasn't even oh my goodness, dude. It was that chart. I'm still triggered to this day by Rust Foundation's chart, or whatever, whoever runs the Rust charting year by year. It was the most misleading, nonsensical thing I've ever seen in my life. Dude, it was marketing to like it was marketing to a T, and it was confusing as it gets.
developers hate Rust is the syntax. People say it's verbose, complex, and downright ugly. For comparison, let's take a look at the map method, which transforms a collection of one type to another type. The function signature in JavaScript is extremely simple, whereas in Rust it gets pretty complicated. We see generics, trait bounds, closures, the size trait, and this signature
Ain't nobody knows what the size trait is, okay? I know there's a lot of people in this chat, they're going to be like, oh, I totally know that. No, you don't. You don't know it. Don't even try it with me. You have no idea what's going on.
doesn't even include lifetimes. So yes, the Rust syntax is more verbose, more complex, and frankly more intimidating than a lot of other languages. But there are some good reasons for this. Rust is a statically typed language which favors explicitness in its type system. And it also has to model things like memory safety in its type system. The benefit of this is that it reduces ambiguity, which in turn reduces errors. The map function in JavaScript doesn't tell us what the type of the input parameter should be, or what the function returns, if anything. Developers have to dig into documentation to figure that out. This opens up the door for runtime errors, because a developer can literally pass in anything to this function. The map method.
He does make a really good point, which is if you're unfamiliar with just static, I mean, Rust is a particularly egregious version of this all. Like, it does just simply have the most verbose syntax. But if you're familiar with any statically typed language, you will quickly become a fan of it because you no longer have to go and like guess what the thing does, or go and like read documentation on the internet, or use your LSP to bring it up and try to like infer the types through whatever you're looking at. You can actually, it's like right there. And so there is something that's very, very nice about having a good function signature. And this is really what TypeScript, this is like half the reason people love TypeScript, is the fact that you have this.
In Rust, on the other hand, tells us exactly what it expects as input and what it returns as output. The code documents itself, and developers are required to follow this function's contract, otherwise they'll get a compile time error. By favoring explicit syntax and having a strong type system, Rust ensures your code is predictable, consistent, easier to refactor, debug, and maintain.
I'm curious about that last one, easy to refactor. I would challenge that one once you get into lifetimes. Like if you went from like make it work, make it correct, make it fast kind of like approach to software, the making it fast, once you start throwing in one lifetime, it will propagate through your whole code base. It's a very leaky, odd thing that happens. Easy to refactor. I mean, I've refactored some Rust. I've done quite a bit of Rust and quite a bit of refactoring of it. And it's a fairly easy language to refactor. Like, it's not that bad. It's just that adding stuff to it, especially when you're especially like lifetime stuff, can become really difficult. And then refactoring in that sense becomes really difficult. And so typically, all the stuff I write that I used Rust for, I just used clone and just avoided it during pretty much the entirety of the process until I really determined that I need to make things better. What's the opposite of refactor? Refuctor. A refactor is where you take the program and you change it and you make it worse.
Also worth pointing out that Rust is constantly evolving, and improvements are being added to make the language more ergonomic. So if you've shied away from Rust because of the syntax or the type system, I completely understand. But I encourage you to give Rust a try and experience that warm fuzzy feeling you get when you successfully compile a program and know that it's basically going to work how you expect at runtime. The third reason developers hate Rust is because
I do want to say that typically in a statically compiled language, like you get this with Go as well, but less so with Go. You get a lot of this with Zig, much more with Zig. Zig is like pretty close to Rust as far as it goes without all the difficulty of Rust. And the comp time is just, it's so compelling. I want to write more Zig. I just don't have reasons to write more Zig. You know what I mean? I just want more Zig in my life. But if you, even any statically typed language, if you can compile it, it's already a step, it's already a step in the right direction. You're already more safe than a dynamic language.
Because they say there are better languages out there. First of all, we have C and C++, which are both low-level and performant. If you're looking for simplicity, you can go with C. And if you're looking for a language that's object-oriented, has modern features, and a mature ecosystem, then you can go with C++. Not to mention that both C and C++ are established, widely used languages with plenty of job opportunities.
That's very fair. That's very fair. It's actually fair. When he says simplicity, what he means by simplicity isn't that writing C is simple. Is that the language itself is simple, right? Like you can learn all of C syntax in a fairly short period of time. So C is simple. Simple does not mean easy. So you have to understand the difference between simple and easy. And so that way, if you don't do that, you're not gonna understand when people say these phrases, because like how short you could, like K&R, the book K&R is like what? You could read it in a day. It's simple. It's just really hard. Okay.
On the other hand, you have Go, a language that's laser focused on simplicity, great for rapid development, and with an excellent concurrency model, it's especially great for building network services, such as web servers, APIs, and microservices. It's also great for CLI tools and automation scripts, and there are plenty open Go job positions. And then, of course, we have Zig. Hey,
by the way, Mr. Rusty over here giving a positive review of Go. That's a lot of respect on him. People have to be able to recognize the strengths. Like I recognize the strengths of what makes TypeScript good. And it's the same thing. It's like Tailwind. If you overuse Tailwind, you get into this place where I think you no longer make it good. I see the same thing with TypeScript. TypeScript has a bunch of really strong points. When I'm developing a front end, I'm going to use the TypeScript compiler. I'm going to use JSDoc to like enable those things because JavaScript without any types is crazy talk to me. And so like I'm fine with all those things. How can we never recognize the greatness of C#? Because I don't wear pleated pants, Pisco. I like
language that also focuses on simplicity.
Zig.
In fact, their tagline is focus on debugging your application rather than debugging your programming knowledge, which I feel like is a shot at Rust, but I'll let it go for now. Zig has no...
By the way, Zig is absolutely incredible. It is one of the most clever languages I've ever seen.
No hidden control flow, no hidden memory allocations, and no preprocessor or macros. This results in fast compile times and seamless compatibility with C and C++ without needing bindings or wrappers. It also includes some safety features like bounce checking and comes with a package manager and testing framework. So with all these...
It also has options, so you avoid the whole nil thing a lot. It also has these nice little typed unions, so you can do error handling, more kind of Rust styles where you can get the value or the error. It has some nice keywords around it, so you can try the function and pull out the error or pull out the value or return out the error. There's a lot of there's a lot of nice little things like it. Isn't comp time kind of like macros? Comp time is kind of like macros. It's not quite the same, right? A Rust macro, it's more like a declarative macro, but you're just writing Zig. That's the difference, is that a declarative macro in Rust, you write out, there's like still a bunch of special things and symbols you have to know. And then doing a procedural macro is even harder, right? It takes a lot of mental overhead. But doing a comp time thing is you're just writing Zig and you're saying, instead of like int, you're saying type. It's like a generic. It's like the halfway. It's more like writing a generic, right? You get that experience where you're just writing the code and the generic is just kind of placed in there and you can do the operations on it. It's really incredible. And then you just instantiate, or I'm not even sure if that's the right term. You specify the comp time, what you want to use. I want to be able to have a queue with an int. I want to be able to have a queue with a this. And it will make sure that at compile time it has those. It's very, very clever.
Options, why would anyone use Rust? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you should use Rust for every single use case, even though that's absolutely true. You should use the right tool for the job, and there are certainly cases where C, C++, Go, or Zig is the right tool. But Rust solves a major problem in the system's programming space in a way that no other language has. Rust gives you an extremely high level of performance coupled with an extremely high level of memory safety. In Zig, if we create an array with one element and then deallocate that array, we can still attempt to access the first element, which will result in the program crashing at runtime. In Rust,
this is true.
If we tried to do the same thing, we would get a compile time error because the ownership rules would prevent us from making this fatal mistake. This is why we're
It is better. Like that is a good reason. Typically you'd use defer, so Zig also has defer, so you can actually execute code after the function ends, which is super cool. I love that from Go, by the way. You have that option. But nonetheless, he's absolutely correct. You can still get a use after free.
Seeing Rust get adopted for critical software like cloud infrastructure at AWS, the world's largest operating systems, Windows, Linux, and Android, and mission-critical software in the aerospace industry, automotive industry, and other embedded devices. For these use cases, Rust is proving to be an excellent tool. The fourth reason developers...
I will say that I think that if Zig came about earlier and was in a slightly more mature state, I do think that Zig would have beat Rust in a lot of these positions. Like right now, Linux... It's pretty much C with some Rust. I honestly think Zig was such a shorter step to get in, and I think Z provides a lot of the safety features you need. I think Zig, like for infrastructure, if Zig was further in, I think Zig would have been chosen just because it is just. I think Zig has a lot of opportunity. It's just still too immature at this point, though it's getting a lot better. It's still not quite there, but it's a very compelling language.
Hate Rust is because they either think there's too much drama or too much hype. I get YouTube comments all the time saying Rust is useless, it's overhyped, it's gonna die out soon, etc.
No, I mean, those people
and
are
look,
stupid.
maybe you don't have a good use case for Rust. Or maybe somebody at work is forcing you to use Rust against your will. And despite seeing a clear benefit, you see all these people online preaching the gospel of Rust. As a member of the Rust evangelism strike force, I get it, sometimes we could be a little much. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, but the numbers and success stories don't lie. Rust's momentum is continuing. 1 million new Rust developers joined the community over the last 12 months.
That's
Rust
really
subreddit has now surpassed the C++ subreddit, and Rust continues to be voted the most loved / most admired language year after year. And we continue to see industry adoption by tech giants like Microsoft, AWS, and Google. So is the hype real? In my completely unbiased opinion, yeah, Rust might be a little overhyped, but the hype is certainly real. But
this is a really good take. I really appreciate this take, which is there's a lot of momentum. And Twitter is a really shitty place to get information. So yeah, it's probably hyped up too hard on Twitter, but it is a great language and it is seeing adoption. It's just, we got to get the jobs, you know? The jobs still aren't there. I think that's the biggest thing, is that if jobs start opening up to like the average person, I think that it will become huge. I'm seeing a lot of Fs. What kind of Fs are we talking about? So I just want to make sure. Is this Fs as in the stream or F as in this? No F? I don't F? Yes. Are you guys effing around on me right now? Are you guys effing around on me? Stream is fine. You just dropping a bunch of Fs? Oh my goodness. Reload. Dude, you can't be just dropping Fs like that. Dude, casually effing me is just not the way to get me to notice you. Actually, it is. It is exactly the way to get me to notice you. Please don't casually F me, okay? It's like, I trust you guys. I trust you guys so much. I know coordination was the key. A bunch of you started saying F. Confused me. Got me scared.
Don't take my word for it. Look at the numbers, look at the success stories, and try it out yourself. On the other hand, some developers hate Rust because of the drama. It's no secret that the Rust Foundation has had its share of controversies. Entire teams leaving, the restrictive copyright policy draft, which sparked backlash, and other governance-related issues. Besides these specific issues, some developers see the foundation as too woke in general. As a result of these controversies, a fork of Rust was created called Crabling to protest back.
Did we just get a Tech Travi Savvy mention? Did we just get a Tech Travi Savvy mention right now? Did we get it? Did we get it? Did we just get a cameo by Tech Savvy Travi? I will take a quick moment. I don't know what he's going to say about the Crabling. I do want to take one quick moment to defend why I think it shouldn't exist and one reason why it should exist. One reason why it should not exist is that it doesn't solve any direct problems. And what I mean by that is that creating a fork just to create a fork doesn't solve anything. But I will say creating a fork, keeping up with things, and showing that there is a community of people willing to contribute to it is saying like, hey, we're upset. You should listen to us. And I think that it's good to remind everybody that, any project on the internet is only as good as its users. And so it's kind of like this. It itself is useless as much as it is useful. Like that's what everyone who makes these things should understand, is that Rust is only as good as the people using it. And you should try to make it so that the people using it are happy, right? Like that's your goal. Fracturing the community is always an L. I do agree with that. Fracturing the community is always an L. But having that as like, this is like, it's not like they're trying to diverge from anything. If they were diverging from it and adding new features or trying to actually do something with Crablang that's not in Rust, then I'd say that that's a big loss. But it's not that. Instead, it's just literally a mirror with a renamed Rust to Crablang. And so at that point, it's just saying, hey, the community wants to hold you accountable. And so I can like that. I can appreciate that.
Bad leadership and bureaucracy. Now, as someone who created an entire channel dedicated to Rust, I definitely have some thoughts on this. In general, I think the drama is a bit overblown. I do genuinely believe that the Rust Foundation is trying to do the right thing. And even though they made mistakes, they did also respond to the community's feedback and made adjustments. Ultimately, I think it's going to take quite a bit more than some drama to derail Rust's momentum. The fifth reason developers hate Rust is because it's too hard. And when people say Rust is hard, they usually mean it in two ways. First of all, Rust is hard to learn. You need to know a bunch of prerequisite computer science knowledge. In addition, Rust is a low-level language which forces you to think about
Number 5, skill issues.
How things are laid out in memory. And Rust has a pretty complicated and unique type system. Things like the ownership and borrowing system, traits and generics, and macros, which take a considerable amount of time and effort to learn. The second way Rust is hard is that it's hard to read and write. Again, it has a pretty complicated type system and verbose syntax. You have to deal with multiple string types, smart pointers, lifetime annotations. I mean, you can't even write a linked list without having a mental breakdown. In addition to the type system and syntax, there's also the borrow checker. Dealing with compile time errors all the time can be very frustrating and definitely slows down productivity. In fact, according to the 2023 Rust Community Survey, the biggest reason preventing people from learning Rust is its difficulty. But honestly, Rust is not the problem. Don't blame a perfectly
skill issues are the problem.
Designed language on a skill issue. If you wanted something easy, then learn a
Let's go. Come on. Can we get it? Can we get some claps here? We got it. We got it. Got the skill issue. Oh my goodness. Pre-watched. It's so pre-watched. We're so over.
Language that's made for 5-year-olds, like Go. Jokes aside,
Boo this man! Boo! Dude, I'm emotionally wrecked now. I'm emotionally wrecked.
I know this is a very valid concern, which is exactly why I created Let's Get Rusty in the first place, to simplify Rust education and make it accessible to everyone. And that's what I'll continue to do. If you want to jumpstart your Rust learning journey, get your free Rust cheat sheet by heading over to letsgetrusty.com/cheat sheet. Hope you've enjoyed the video and remember to stay rusty.
This is actually a really good video, and I think it had a lot of good things to say, especially number 5, being the whole point about skill issues in Rust. Honestly, the borrower checker is not crazy. It is not hard. It itself is not a hard concept. It's once you kind of put everything together, it starts getting more and more difficult. When you want to have impls on traits and async and everything all together, then you start getting things that are just like much harder to reason about and harder to like make it well. I made this joke and people tried to dunk on me. It's just that they're doing the worst version of the dunking, which is making it too trivially easy to like. The trivial case is always trivial, which is Rust being a mostly functional language. Its biggest difficulty is using functions as values. It's actually once you get beyond like the basics, it becomes really difficult. It becomes very, very difficult. Because you have to really think, because if it's just like a pure function, then it's easy. But once you start hitting into some closures, sprinkle a little bit of async in there and doing things, you can find yourself running into some situations that make it harder. You have to do a lot of changes and move async, move. Like, there's just some things you have to think about doing that become more and more difficult. And if you haven't done it, you're going to say it's easy. But until you've done it, it becomes, it takes a little bit. And it's all practice in the end, and eventually you get really good at it, or at least you get mild at it. Everything becomes an arc, yes, or an RC ref cell, an arc mutex, or an RC ref cell. Like, it all becomes that because you have to use it in certain ways, and it becomes difficult. But there are a lot of things that are really nice about Rust. Honestly, I do trust when I compile a program. Generally, I trust it more just because I don't have some stupid things that I tend to do in other languages, just because it forces me to only make mute the things that are mutable. And so for me, that's really nice, right? Like, it just is. I tend to appreciate that. I find myself, any plans for Rust courses on boot.dev? The hard part about doing a good Rust course is that people feel there's so many different ways. This is kind of like my second big critique of Rust, is that there's so many different ways to skin the cat. And that's one thing I really, really, really dislike about it, which is anytime you do something, someone else also says, no, this is a better way he would do it. Yeah, TJ wants to focus on doing a Rust course. And so, like, that's a real difficulty, is having everybody tell you a different way you could possibly do it. And so there's something about that that's really frustrating. It's actually one of the primary reasons why I'm learning Go. Is Go, typically, there's like really just one way you do things. And there's one pattern that's kind of coming about that people seem to really like. And like, that's it. So either you have config as a struct, or you have yourself this new like function option parameters. And like, that's it. And it just feels easier. You have like one way to do something. I do miss pattern matching. I do miss a lot of these higher level features, but I also don't miss lifting, right? I also don't miss all the lifting and extra things you have to do in Rust to make it work. And so it's like, it's kind of an in-between. I'm not sure which one, just like a 5-year-old. What would a 5-year-old say? I'm not sure really which one I like better, honestly, Rust or Go. I actually have no opinion yet on it. That's not the way to do Rust. Buy my course. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot of that. And so you really have to think a lot more doing things with Rust. And you're going to find yourself arguing with yourself on different ways to go about it. And so I find, like, honestly, that's where I find a lot of the skill issues come from, is that there's so many different ways to skin the cat. The name, the Primogen, the Rustogen, really. I did years of it. Absolutely loved it.